Mr. President, I would ask consent that I be permitted to enter into a colloquy with my colleagues, Senator Wicker and Senator Harkin.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I have the honor of being the Senate Chair of the U.S. Helsinki Commission. The ranking Republican member is Senator Wicker, and we joined with our House colleagues in the work of the Helsinki Commission. I mention that because this past week, the 23rd Annual Parliamentary Assembly was held in Baku, Azerbaijan, in which over 300 parliamentarians participated. It was from June 28th through July 2nd, and we had a very strong representation from the United States Senate in the House of Representatives representing the United States. I was proud to join with Senator Wicker and Senator Harkin, as well as Congressman Smith, Congressman Aderholt, Congressman Gingrich, Congressman Schweikert, and Congressman Schiff. We represented the U.S. interest. But by way of background, for some of my colleagues who may not be familiar, the Helsinki Commission is the U.S. participation in the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe. This followed up on the Helsinki Accords that took place in 1975, when all the countries of Europe, including the Soviet Union, joined the United States and Canada and agreed on principles. These are principles that recognize the importance of good governance, human rights, economic opportunity, as well as territorial security in order to have stability within the OSCE participating states. And the United States has been an active participant in this process. I think we saw the value of the OSCE directly when Russia invaded Crimea, and the OSCE mission that was there were our eyes and ears on the ground and helped restore some semblance of order in Ukraine as it now is moving forward. But in our work in Baku, we were representing the United States on some extremely important issues. And I want to talk about some of those issues, and my colleagues that are on the floor are going to talk about issues that they championed. But I must tell you, Russia sent a very strong delegation to Baku to represent their country. And on behalf of the U.S. delegation, I brought forward a resolution in regards to violations. It was titled Clear, Gross, and Uncorrected Violations of Helsinki Principles by the Russian Federation. Now, this resolution became the principal debate of the 23rd Parliamentary Assembly. We held a plenary debate. We don't normally do that. We normally debate issues in different committees. But the entire Assembly debated the issue concerning Russia's activities within Ukraine because of the seriousness of this matter. Russia violated all 10 core principles of OSCE. And we had that in the resolution. We were very clear about that. We believe that the best way to bring about compliance with these universal values is to put a spotlight on those who are violating it. And in Russia's invasion into Ukraine, their taking over Crimea, their interference in eastern Ukraine, they have violated each of the 10 core principles, including, these are the core principles, including sovereign equality, refraining from the use of force, inviolability of frontiers, territorial integrity of the states, peaceful settlement of disputes, non-intervention in internal affairs, respect for human rights and fundamental freedoms, equal rights and self-determination of people, cooperation among states, and fulfillment in good faith of the obligations under international law. Our delegation brought that forward. Russia countered with justifications that we found totally unacceptable. But it was a very spirited debate. Many amendments were offered to our resolution because by the time we debated the resolution, between that and the time we filed it, there have been certain changes by Russia's behavior. So the resolution was actually made stronger through the amendment process, which is what we intended at the time. And Russia made various pleas to try to delete various sections of our resolution. And by overwhelming votes of the parliamentarians of Europe, Central Asia, United States, and Canada, we passed this resolution that the United States brought forward, pointing out the clear violations of Russia's commitments under the OSCE in its activities in Ukraine. It passed by over a 3-to-1 vote. We had a 3-to-1 vote among the parliamentarians. And we were very proud of the work that we had done to bring forward that clear statement on behalf of the parliamentarians of the OSCE. I am extremely proud of the role that my colleagues played. We were involved in many, many other issues. Senator Wicker was one of the key spokesmen on several issues relating to our involvement within the OSCE. He was involved in bringing out our involvement in Afghanistan, which is of continued interest. In addition to the 57 participating countries of the OSCE, we have partners for cooperation. These are countries that are not located within our geographical bounds, but have interests in the OSCE. Afghanistan is one of our partners for cooperation. We just finished a hearing of the Helsinki Commission on our Mediterranean partners, which include Tunisia, Algeria, Israel, Jordan, Egypt, and we work with Morocco, all partners for cooperation. So the reach of the Helsinki is far beyond just Europe and Central Asia. In this parliamentary assembly, we took up issues that involved many of these other matters. And Mr. President, if I might, let me yield to my colleague, Senator Wicker, for comments he might want to make in regards to the work that we did in Baku.
Well,
The senator from Mississippi.
thank you, Mr. President, and I thank my two colleagues from the other side of the aisle for joining with us today in this colloquy. And let me say how proud I was as a Republican senator from Mississippi to stand shoulder to shoulder with my colleague from Maryland, Ben Cardin. I can tell you he has, there are probably many places in Maryland he would rather have been at the beginning of July 2014. But he is someone who, year after year, has taken the time to travel to sometimes some rather unknown capital cities like Baku or Chisinau, Moldova, and represent the United States in our partnership with the OSCE on the Helsinki Commission. As Senator Cardin said, the 1975 final act of the Helsinki Commission recognized 10 principles that 57 countries in Europe and Eurasia said we believe we can stand by and live with and live under. Issues such as territorial integrity, sovereignty, refraining from the use of force, very important cornerstones of peace and democracy and self-determination, rule of law in Europe. And it is certainly a fact that is well known within the OSCE and with the delegations that come from far and wide to attend these, that Ben Cardin is respected internationally, that his word carries some weight, that he speaks on behalf of the United States of America and on behalf of the OSCE countries with authority, with even-handedness and fairness. And so I think it meant a lot, Madam President, for someone of Senator Cardin's stature to come forward and present these. And indeed, we did have an overwhelming support for the supplemental item authored by Senator Cardin. The amendments to water it down by the Russian delegation were rejected time and again by overwhelming votes. And then in the end, the final resolution was adopted by over 90 votes in favor of the Cardin resolution and only 30 votes against it. Of course, the delegates from the Russian Federation and several of their closest allies and neighbors voted against it. But country after country, delegation after delegation, small brave nation after small brave nation voted in favor of it because internationally we realize that the words of the resolution were correct. The action of Russia in Crimea and invading this defenseless peninsula and annexing it illegally, that action violated all 10 principles of the Helsinki Final Act, and it needed to be said. And it needed to be said not only by the United Nations, which has in effect said this in the General Assembly. It needed not only to be said by a major power like the United States of America through our State Department and through the Congress, but it also needed to be said by the collective body that represents these 57 countries from Europe and Eurasia. So at this point, Madam President, I'm going to ask that the final supplemental item, as adopted by the by the Parliamentary Assembly, be inserted in full in the congressional record at this time.
Without objection.
Thank you, Madam President. Now, it may be that Senator Harkin will want to touch on this issue also, but it is, I think, significant that we have such great leadership in both bodies, in the Senate and in the House, with the OSCE, people who are willing to take the time to get to know our European neighbors at the parliamentary level and have that exchange there. People like Congressman Robert Adderholt, who is a vice president of the Parliamentary Assembly and who has been very diligent and again in traveling to some of these exotic locations that nobody perhaps envies the travel to. And Congressman Chris Smith, a senior veteran House member who speaks out so eloquently and so firmly, not only for the rule of law and human rights internationally, but has actually been recognized by the Parliamentary Assembly as a special representative on the issue of human rights and trafficking. And I want to commend our colleague from the House of Representatives, Congressman Smith, Chairman Smith, for his leadership in getting past a resolution condemning the trafficking in minors internationally and getting the Parliamentary Assembly to take a strong statement on the record on this very serious problem that faces not only us here domestically, but also on the international.
Would my colleague yield on that point?
Indeed.
I appreciate you mentioning Congressman Smith's child sex trafficking supplementary resolution. That was a separate resolution that was approved by the Parliamentary Assembly. The Helsinki Commission has been in the forefront on trafficking issues. The Trafficking in Persons report that is prepared annually is used by our State Department and is known globally as the document on evaluating how states have proceeded on trafficking issues. The work really started in the Parliamentary Assembly of the OSCE through the leadership of our commission and Congressman Smith, who has been our champion. It led to the passage of legislation in 2000 that has the Trafficking in Persons report, and we followed it up at this year's Parliamentary Assembly on child sex trafficking. And I do congratulate Chairman Smith and our delegation for continuing the sensitivity. The OSCE now has a special representative on trafficking, so we do provide technical assistance in each of our participating states to deal with the trafficking issue. I wanted to point out that we do a lot of our work in the three committees, and in one of those committees' work, Senator Harkin was extremely valuable in pointing out that the original document prepared by the committee did not mention the very important human rights concerns of people with disability. And there is no stronger voice in the United States Senate than Senator Harkin on the rights of people with disabilities. And I must tell you, I heard from many of my colleagues in the Parliamentary Assembly how honored they were that Senator Harkin was in Baku to bring this issue to the attention of the Parliamentary Assembly, to get it its proper attention. And the matters that he brought forward were were overwhelmingly adopted at the Parliamentary Assembly. And if I might, let me yield to Senator Harkin to talk a little bit about the work that he did in Baku.
Mr. President, first, I just want to ask unanimous consent that Briggs Noun and Margaret Chelsvig, interns in my personal office, be granted for privileges for the duration of today's session.
Without objection.
First, I want to thank my colleagues, Senator Cardin and Senator Wicker, for their leadership in the OSCE. I want to especially thank Senator Cardin for inviting me to join them in this delegation, 8-member delegation that we had over in Baku last week. I want to express again my gratitude to Senator Cardin for offering the amendment that basically, as he said, was adopted by the whole Parliamentary Assembly, pointing out that Russia, the Russian Federation, had not only violated the principles of the OSCE, but their own international commitments. And again, I want to congratulate Senator Cardin for his leadership on that and for pushing that through and the overwhelming vote of support that he got. I want to congratulate also Congressman Smith, the co-chair of the delegation, for his amendment dealing with child sex trafficking. Again, Senator Cardin, I offer you my thanks for allowing me to join you and be able to offer 3 amendments in the Committee on Economic Affairs, Science, Technology, and the Environment. 3 amendments dealing with the issue of the rights of people with disabilities in the OSCE nations. All 3 amendments were adopted by the committee and then subsequently adopted by the full Parliamentary Assembly. The committee resolution that we offered had 3 parts. It ensured equal opportunity and access for all persons with disabilities in daily activities of all member states. Secondly, it called for the ratification of the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities by all OSCE members. And third amendment was the prohibition of discrimination against people with disabilities in employment and the workplace. And again, as I made the point there, and I make the point again, that any country, including our own, that does not through its laws, its policies, and its structures, enable people with disabilities to be full participating members of society, including in the workplace, that country is not only what I would say violating human rights, but it's also denigrating its own economic activities. We know from experience, especially in our own country, that people with disabilities, if given the opportunity to work, not only can work, but many times outwork their non-disabled cohorts. And so by encouraging countries to set up structures so that people with disabilities can be fully employed is, again, a mark of economic progress for those countries, as well as enabling people to have their dignity and their human rights. So I was just very honored to be able to join the delegation and to offer those amendments and to have them adopted by the Assembly. And again, I thank our leaders, Senator Cardin and Senator Wicker, for inviting me to join them and allowing me the opportunity to offer these amendments which focus on the issue of equal opportunity for people with disabilities in the member states and indeed across the globe.
And Madam President, I want to congratulate my colleague from Iowa, a senior member of this body, someone who's respected around the globe for being willing to meet with fellow parliamentarians and so successfully put forward language that was adopted by consensus. If I could mention a couple of other matters that pertain to this trip. First of all, it's interesting, I think, that the capital of Azerbaijan, Baku, on the western shore of the Caspian Sea, would be the host of this Parliamentary Assembly. Azerbaijan is an ally of the United States, an important ally. I think it's important for Americans and for members to know that the neighbor to the north is Russia, the neighbor to the south is Iran, and this is a very, very tough neighborhood that our ally exists in. And yet, they are oriented to the West, they are oriented to the United States, they want to be allies of ours. They were steadfast friends of ours in Afghanistan and have been during the entire time that we have been there. Madam President, they're steadfast allies of the nation of Israel. And again, I think for a majority Muslim state such as Azerbaijan to take that stand in a troubling neighborhood speaks well of them. There are steps that we wish they would take further toward transparency and openness and the rule of law, and maybe their elections weren't all that we hoped for in the past, but they are an ally that continues to make progress. And so I salute our host nation. I think it should also be said, and I'll yield to Senator Cardin on this point, that we stopped back by Chisinau, Moldova, on the way back from Baku, a member of the OSCE, a nation that is also in a troubling neighborhood, that feels the breath of Moscow breathing down their collars and the threats by people from the Russian Federation that would like to exert undue influence on that brave little nation. It happened that we were there, Madam President, on the day that the Moldovan Parliament ratified the agreement associating Moldova with the European Union. And this was a wonderful day for the Friends of Freedom and the European-oriented citizens of Moldova. It was great to see the young people walking through the city with the flags and hear Beethoven's Ode to Joy, the European anthem, as it were, and to be there for this very significant, pivotal day in the history of Moldova, and to say that we're going to continue to stand with the brave people of that country. And I know Senator Cardin was thinking of those things when he scheduled that stop for our delegation.
Senator Wicker, let me first, you were able to meet with the president of Azerbaijan, and we thank you for that. You were able to adjust your calendar so you could do that, and we appreciate it because it was very important they hear the message that you just made on the floor of the United States Senate. And Azerbaijan is an important ally of the United States. They have issues that they need to deal with on human rights. We were clear about that. We met with the NGO community while we were there. But I think your leadership in the way that you balanced that presentation was very, very important. There's also the energy issue that Azerbaijan is very important to us in that region as an energy source for Europe. So it's an important strategic country. And yes, we do have issues on human rights. We did meet with the NGOs, and we'll continue to voice those concerns. I'm glad you mentioned Chisinau and Moldova. We also, on the way over, visited with Georgia. And Georgia and Moldova have two things in common. They're both moving towards Europe with the association agreements. They recognize their economic and political future is with Europe, and they both have Russian troops in their country, and that they are both very much concerned about what is happening in Ukraine. And as you know, we got tremendous interest about what we did in Baku on taking on the Russians directly about their violations of the OSCE principles in their activities in Ukraine. Moldova, as you know, in the Transnistria area, which borders the Ukraine, there are Russian troops there. And the independence of Moldova is very much impacted by Russia's presence in Transnistria. Even though there's no border between Moldova and Russia, they still have that real threat that Russia could use its force to try to dictate policy in Moldova. And in Georgia, of course, with the territories being controlled by the Russians, we saw what happened there, the bloodshed. It's a country that is very much concerned about being able to control their own destiny, and they want to be independent, and they don't want to be dominated by Russia's intimidations. And I think our presence in both of those countries was a clear signal that the United States stands for an independent Georgia, an independent Moldova, that we want them to make their own decisions. We believe their future is clearly with integration into Europe. They believe their future is with integration into Europe, and we're going to continue to be very supportive of those activities. Let me, if I might, I want to just add one more thing in regards to our work in Baku. There are a lot of issues that were taken up in the Baku Declaration. For example, our delegation brought forward a resolution on the 10th anniversary of the Berlin Conference dealing with anti-Semitism. Congressman Smith and myself both were involved in the original Berlin issues. And Madam President, I know my colleague has already put into the record the resolution concerning Russia and Ukraine. I'm going to ask consent that we may include the entire Baku Declaration that was approved at the Parliamentary Assembly into the record.
Without objection.
I must tell you, I'm so proud of our participation in this forum. I think the United States learned a lot more about OSCE during the Ukraine crisis when they saw that it was the OSCE mission that was on the ground giving us independent information about what was happening in Ukraine, the importance of our participation, and what Senator Wicker said in the beginning. This is not, our work here knows no political boundary. This is not a partisan effort. It's been Democrats and Republicans working over the last 40 years to use the Helsinki principles to advance good governance, economic opportunity, and human rights throughout not just the OSCE countries, but really globally. And it's been a real pleasure to work with Senator Wicker on these issues, and I thank him for his dedication and leadership. There's been no stronger voice on the floor of the United States Senate in regards to human rights issues. I've been on the floor listening to Senator Wicker as he's talked about individual cases of human rights violations in Russia and other countries. He speaks out his mind on these issues, and I'm proud to be associated with him on the Helsinki Commission.
Well, Madam President, I think I'll let Senator Cardin have the last word on this matter, and then I see that there are others who want to speak on other issues. But let me just emphasize to everyone within the sound of our voices, diplomacy and foreign policy is carried out not only by the executive branch through our State Department and through the other good offices that we have in the executive branch. Foreign policy is alive and well through the participation of members of the House and Senate in the Parliamentary Assembly, in the OSCE. It's important that we keep our role there, and so my hat is off to the leaders of this Congress, House and Senate, who have been willing over the years to exercise leadership and to earn credibility in the OSCE, and I am proud to have stood with them this year in this delegation, and I believe we came back with a better understanding. I would also I would interject that I appreciate the role of Radio Free Europe and Radio Liberty in covering our participation there and in getting that out to the rest of the world. But I'm proud to have stood with this delegation, 8 members, House and Senate, senior members and relatively new ones, standing for the principles of the rule of law and transparency and democracy among our allies in Europe and Eurasia. And I yield to my friend.
Well, I think, Senator Wicker, you have summarized it as the way I would just want to be identified with your comments. And I thank again all the participants, the 8 members who took their time to participate on behalf of the United States. And that, Madam President, I would yield the floor.